ourselves face to face, my friend. Welcome. If you're tuning in, welcome to the now world famous Grognards of Gaming podcast. I'm one of the ancient Grognards that runs this place. Uh, Phil, at your service. And I'm joined by my very, very good friend. Go ahead and introduce yourself, my friend.
Rob, the Grognard dog.
All right, Rob, woof woof, the Grognard dog. Woo! Now, of course, we've also you and I have also talked about the correct pronunciation of the word. Is it Grognard? Is it Grognard? I think from our exchanges, my friend, I think they're pretty much interchangeable. What do you think?
Yeah, the original French word that referred to Napoleon's old guard, sure. If you're going to say it in French, it's Grognard. And if you're a
Yeah,
purist, then more power to you. But yeah, I think it's been anglicized by the gaming community, so we could say Grognard, sure.
that's it. All right. Well, I agree 100%. Now that we've got that out of the way and settled, let's talk about some other really cool stuff. Now, I think, if I'm not mistaken, you and I were going to talk about our favorite story arcs tonight. And boy, howdy, I had some thinking. I know you did too. And I'm really excited to tell you about them because you were involved in at least one, but not all of them. And I'm sure on your side, I'm going to hear about some cool story arcs. So I think for the pleasure of our listeners, let's dig right in. You want to go first, or shall I?
Sure, I'll go first. So, I think I did this in the high fidelity John Cusack Jack Black method. I did the top five stories.
Nice.
So I'm gonna start with number five and work my way up. So the David Letterman rules. So
Yes, exactly.
I think that my number five favorite story arc was a Cthulhu game run by our friend Michelle. Now we mentioned Michelle in an earlier episode, and
Yeah, we did.
she's a really great game master or game mistress, however you want to put it. And one of her favorite settings is the horror setting, is the gothic horror setting, is the Lovecraft Cthulhu setting. And when I started gaming with her and that group, the Queen's group, I had never even heard of H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos, and they really introduced me to it. And so I started when they said that when Michelle said she wanted to run a game in that setting. I really kind of did my research and tried to learn as much as I could about the setting. But I was very much a neophyte, and that may well be why it was such a thrilling experience for me, because she ran a one shot. It was just two players, and our friend Jason was the other player, and he was the opposite of my character. His character was a very experienced owner of an antiquities store, and all the antiquities had a history in the mythos, you know. And I played this character who was like a young lawyer, and was very much, grounded in the real world, and very sort of what would be the opposite of being like Cervantes' Don Quixote, the opposite of being quixotic. I guess it would be Sancho Panza's character, Panzaic. He was very Panzaic. He was
Yeah,
very,
Hanzea.
didn't really see
Right.
the spiritual side of things.
Hmm.
And so what Michelle did was she ran a single session that just took place in the setting of Jason's character's antiquities shop, and a visitor comes, and it is a character from the mythos. Now, I didn't know that, and her name is Kezia, and Kezia is, I believe, a witch who was either an historical figure or a fictional character who was burned at the stake at Salem, and sort of comes
Wow.
back, for revenge.
Cool.
And
Cool
yeah,
backstory. Wow.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
I'm getting into it
and
already.
and I'm telling you, it was a very simple story. It was just like Jason's character and my character in the store, and Kezia comes in and just like terrifies us, just horrifies us by
Wow.
by her magic. The fact that I, as a player, was a neophyte to the setting, and the and
Yeah.
Cthulhu characters are supposed to be not the cognoscenti. They are not the Illuminati.
That's
They are
right.
people who are outside of the loop. And so just the slightest exposure to the otherworldly, to the eldritch,
Right.
is horrifying to them. It had
Right.
that effect on me. So that
Yeah.
that was a really wonderful instance of where the like the fictional world and the reality, the metagaming reality, overlapped to such an extent that it captured the zeitgeist, and it was just
Yeah.
spot on. Yeah.
Yeah, what you're describing there, I was going to say, is a very meta experience, which is rare, so, and there are golden moments in role playing. I think that you experience, I know I experience, where you get this meta feeling where you, the player, are immersed enough. You get this feeling of flow in your story, where you start truly feeling some of the things your character's feeling, and so
Yeah.
especially in that genre where and how it was introduced to me. And I had played a couple of Call of Cthulhu games here and there, and I'm a big fan of the genre in general, but I don't have as much experience as you do. But the idea that your investigator character or your character is has revealed to himself or herself hidden knowledge, this arcane world, insanity from beyond the stars that really is not what human brains can really comprehend. You're in the game. Your investigator will go insane. Like, you have to just be okay with that.
Yeah.
But if you have a skilled GM like Michelle and the group that you had, they'll be able to deliver to you, the player, this feeling inside your gut of, oh my gosh, like this is something ancient and terrible, and no, I don't understand it at all, and I love not understand. You would be okay with it, so you really go with that flow. That's pretty cool. That's
and
really
that
great.
and that
That's really
can be
great.
tough. That can be tough for a GM, especially because some players, and I'm actually thinking of our friend Sandy.
Mhm.
He does not like to play Cthulhu games because he knows that his player is doomed. He does, and he doesn't like that. He wants to
Doesn't
play.
love that. Yeah.
Yeah, his enjoyment of role playing games is doing something heroic, and I understand that, and
Hmm.
that's perfectly valid. And so maybe
Yeah.
Cthulhu isn't for everyone, but boy, I got to tell you, I really think that if Sandy let Michelle run a Cthulhu game for him, he would love it because she's just
He might be hooked. He might be hooked, especially the way that Michelle does it too. He might
yeah.
really enjoy it. That's really cool. That is really cool. I'm going to be thinking about that later on after we're done recording tonight. I'll be like, oh yeah, that was a really cool idea. Um, Maybe I'll send away for a Call of Cthulhu book just to get myself back to that. I don't know.
Ooh.
I have a good friend here in my area that is a huge HP Lovecraft, and he actually has, as a side note, he's actually written some short stories in the Cthulhu universe. And one of the things they got published was last year. I actually helped him edit it, and I took a look at it. Um, he actually writes for the Steve Jackson magazine, or one of them, and his story is Cthulhu in space. And Cthulhu doesn't care if you're on Earth or space. He's from beyond the stars anyway. So it was horror plus like space opera, which was really cool. I actually, now that I think about it, I would think you would love that story because you love a space opera, but you also have this experience with horror. So you might love the peanut butter and chocolate being mixed in this way,
Yeah.
so to speak. That's really cool.
Well,
I love it.
you ran a one shot of Cthulhu in space. Remember, I played the sort of the pencil necked doctor, and Peter
I
and Chris
did,
ran the.
didn't I?
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
yeah, but that was a one shot, and I'm hoping to play that again because that was a lovely
Was it
game.
Fate? Was it Fate?
It was Fate. Yeah, it
Yeah,
was Fate. Now, go
I
ahead.
think it was. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, when I played with Michelle, she used Chaosium's rules, and I know that
sure.
there have been many incarnations of the game, but yes, we used Fate.
Okay, well then let's put that on our list for when I visit, and we do the podcast in vivo, like live, man, like from us
Yeah.
being there.
Oh
Let's
man.
also that night. Well, let's do that. Um, I gotta see if I have my notes on that, but yes, I would love to do that. So my list starts and ends. It's going to be a weird way to set this up, but it definitely starts and ends with our vaunting story arc from the Ars Magica game in New York. And what I put on my notes was Old Meridian. So notice I didn't say Meridian, I said Old Meridian. So the story arc, and if you don't mind a little bit of pride here, it was my own story arc. So I'm extolling my own virtues, and I don't mean to be, I mean to be humble about it, but what made it great was how you all reacted and the parts that all of you contributed. So one of my reasons to say that it starts and ends, my list starts and ends with that, because I don't ever credit myself to think that a story arc would be all awesome because I sat there on some Saturday morning going, I know what I'm going to do and this is going to be great. It's always on the interaction of players, but it has to. Like, it's not just nice to have, it's a must have that they have contributions that make that story arc ultimately what it is or what it becomes. Because without that, you only have like ideas on paper. You might have a nice short story, but you don't really have it in action, right? So you guys all contributed stuff that made that all so real in my head that the story arc began to fuel itself. And so, of my favorite story arcs, I'm gonna give a paint. I'm gonna paint it. You know it well, of course, but I'm gonna paint it for our listeners. In Ars Magica, you create a covenant where the covenant is and it can take many forms, but it's like a safe haven for wizards to cooperate in peace for mutual study and protection. That's in general how that works in the Ars Magica system. So when I met all of you in New York, and I was a young teacher out there, and I started my career, and after I responded to your personal ad at the Complete Strat. If you remember this, we covered that in the previous episode.
Yes, we did.
The characters you guys created, we were vibrant and really interesting. The virtues and flaws system in that book we talked about. We had a previous episode about favorite systems. We talked about the virtues and flaws. Those all really contributed to make your characters really good. But I think a lot of us really ended up bonding over the shared design of the Covenant. But what became really interesting is I began to think, well, wait a minute. What would it be like if there was actually a history that not even we had decided on? I remember reflecting on a couple of our sessions about Covenant design and what we want, where we wanted to set it. We set it up in we set it in northern Wales in an island called Anglesey, just off the northern coast. And as a fun footnote, I think you remember that our mutual friend Chris, who was a player, he actually traveled to Anglesey and brought us back. He brought me back a piece of a rock as well as a travel guide to Anglesey, and I was like, man, he actually went there. That was really cool. But at any rate, so we had this like wizard's tower in Anglesey in the middle of this forest. Right, it was near a fairy forest, if you recall. And so we really had a great time bonding over that. But I thought, man, what if there was some things that they didn't know? And as we began to develop the story, there are many things even I didn't know. So the story arc became something that interested me because I would never know what you guys were going to do with a particular clue. And I confess, and this is maybe a GMing hack too, to again invoke a previous session, but I confess that many times I would throw something down as a clue, and I'd say, I wonder what they'll do with it, because they'll contribute something that I'll then think of, and then it spun off into something much better and more interesting than anything I could have come up with had I just sat there in my living room and had to think about it. Right? No, often I would say a thing, and then Chris would ask a question, or you'd ask a question, or Peter would ask a question about it, and I go, I don't know. Why don't you like make a magic investigation roll? And then like the roll would go well, and I'm like, crap, I got to come up with something. But that would spin off of something. So the way that the old Moridon story arc happened was, I don't know if you remember this, but it was from a couple of strange rolls that I had people roll to detect magic in the area around the Covenant. Because I think at that time, I believe it was, and I want to credit Chris with this. Chris had the insight of, well, like how far does our magic aura actually go? My character will map this out. And I thought, well, that's totally legitimate, I think. Wizards, of course, want to know the extent of the magic aura. And then he made this roll, and it was really good. And I was like, well, something else is underneath the ground. And I remember thinking, like, I don't even know where I'm going to go with this. But that was part of the fun, right?
That is fun.
Turns out that there was a covenant that the way that we discovered it, or the way that we developed it, there was a covenant underneath the grounds of our current covenant. And then that forced me to explain the history, and someone had already been there. What that led to was, if you remember, your characters, the master of your master was allied with the master of somebody else. I don't remember who it was. Right? So we actually Peter's, yeah. So we super backplotted the hell out of what ultimately was like one or two rolls in the game, and it became this huge story arc,
Wow.
and I never intended that.
That's so
But
funny. I didn't know all of
right?
that.
Oh, you didn't? Oh, I thought I told you all about
Maybe you did, and I
this.
forgot over the
Yeah,
decades. I mean,
I'm
that
sure.
was
Yeah,
the
yeah.
1990s after all.
Yeah, no, right. You know, I told you this on April 5, 1997. I'm sure I did.
Yeah,
No,
I've lost
yeah,
many
come
brain
on,
cells
man.
since then.
What's wrong with you? No, yeah, no, come on, dude. No, but like it actually came up. Some of the story arcs came up by complete accident, and actually, the ones I there's another one that I'm going to talk about a little bit later. It's your turn next, but I'm going to talk about another one that was a complete accident. So I'm going to get to that in a minute. But I have to tell you, some of that stuff was so fun for me because I had never planned it. Never planned it.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, do your number four, because rather than jump back to this topic,
Oh,
let's go ahead. Let's extend it. So what was the other happy surprise that ended up in a number four story arc for you?
okay. So Happy Surprise, in a so similar vein, same category, Happy Surprise, that led to a long thing. It was actually a Middle Earth role playing campaign, or the MERP system. And you remember we talked about the MERP system in a previous episode, and we talked about how it was kind of a role master light, very heavy on the rules. But you know, one thing I love about MERP to this day is that the writers of the system are such Tolkien students
Yeah.
that what they produced is indistinguishable from canon. Right
Yep.
now, don't tell the Tolkien estate I said that, but I'm just saying. You know, like their maps are beautiful and a lot of their place names and all these and the races they did. Anyway, so what happened was I introduced MERP. This is when I was living in. This is actually after I moved back to Michigan from New York, and it's a group I had many years ago. But anyway, no matter. It was, however, a couple of them were new to MERP. They were not new to role playing, but I had at the outset of this particular story arc, I believe I had 4 or 5 players at the time, and they were really invested in the story, but like in the Tolkien universe, right? They were really like I kind of got them really into this whole thing. Anyway, so we made Middle Earth role playing characters, and I had a vague idea of a couple of things I wanted to happen in the story arc. But I remember thinking, Phil, you know what? Don't start out with a huge idea where you want this to go. Start out with like half an idea, and just like Ars Magic. So, I mean, you guys kind of trained me to expect this from players, expect those contributions, right? Let's leave it kind of open ended to see where it goes. So this story arc is called the Dwarven Coin, and this is because in the setting was Rovanian, or the wilderness, right? So think the eastern side of the Misty Mountains. The vales of the Anduin River, of course, separates the boughs of the Greenwood the Great, or Mirkwood as we know it, from the Misty Mountains by a tract of many miles. But the dwarves who lived in the Misty Mountains, as well as the Gray Mountains to the north, they made many ancient roads. They made many roads that were known to them. Some were hidden. They had to trade with their neighbors. They traded some with the elves when they were more at peace with the elves, etc. So what had happened was I narrated a scene where several scenes where the characters were leaving from Rivendell on some quest. I don't remember. I confess I have no recollection of what quests that Elrond and his entourage put them on, and it doesn't matter because they went over the Kirithborn and Andrath, which is like the high pass over Misty Mountains, and they come into the Anduin Vales and they meet um, a delegation of dwarves from Erebor. I'm going to have to say it was Erebor, and I'm going to have to say that if I remember this correctly, which I do not. It was probably pre-Smog. I don't remember exactly. You get it. But they meet these dwarves, and there's some exchange of a combination of pleasantries plus suspicion, because dwarves are suspicious. One of the characters is a dwarf. He introduces himself. He's from, I don't know, Khazad-dûm or somewhere. I'm not sure. And they discover that there's a stolen ton of treasure, or they think it's stolen, and it contains it contains some coins. And I don't remember exactly how this ton of treasure, this little coffer, is actually a coffer of treasure, gets transferred to one of the characters, but it does. And inevitably, he says, well, what's in it? Like, it's like he picks the lock easily, he opens it up. And I was like, and I rolled the dice, 22 mithril pieces. Now, mithril pieces are very in the MERP system, they're like 100 gold pieces. They're very expensive. So this is like some kind of like kingly ransom, right? But there's exactly 22. And they're like, cool. All right, 22. And like, it was a die roll, right? And after the game, I don't remember. They eventually made it to some destination. I want to say Bjorn's house, right? I don't know. After the game, I thought to myself, why 22? Yes, of course, the dice determine this. 22. What's weird about 22? And then it hit me that dwarves, Tolkienian dwarves, do things in multiples of 7. So, for example, their corridors are 7, 14, or 20 feet wide, 21 feet wide. According to the Moria, like there's a supplement called Moria, right? So they do things in terms of in multiples of 7 wherever possible, because it invokes the seven dwarves, the 7 tribes of the dwarves, right? So there's a reason for 7s, right? 3s and 7s or whatever, right? So I was like, 22 is weird because it's like one more from 21. And then I started thinking, what was that extra coin for? What if the ransom or payment was actually 21 coins, but there's a 22nd coin for some weird reason? Why would a dwarf knowingly go off of their 7 patterns of 7 and include a 22nd coin, especially when it's more expensive? They're losing more money. No dwarf wants to pay extra. And so that spun off to this whole like huge arc of dwarven intrigue between the surviving dwarves of the area, the dwarves that lived in the area, and the 22nd coin was a bribe. It was a special bribe, but it was also a message being sent, right? And so, I confess, I don't remember every detail of this. I just remember me loving the story arc because of a random mistake that then got interpreted. But what also happened is the players started asking questions that I couldn't answer right away, but I desperately wanted to, right?
Yeah.
So have you ever had this situation where the players ask, and in our GMing hacks, we talked, for example, about making sure you have a list of names, because they always ask what's the NPC's name, and if you don't give them a name, they know he's not important, right? Yeah, we talked about this. But they asked very insightful questions because for some reason, this group that I had was particularly curious, and they were very suspicious in a fun way of all of my side quests. Like they'd go, like I'd say, all right, make a perception roll, and they'd roll high enough, and I go, you see a fire out there in the woods, and they go, we stay on the road. I'm like, are you sure? Like, are you sure? They're like, no, Phil, we know your side quest crap. We're not going to do it. I'm like, but it's a very good side quest. It might be bandits. It might be bandits. They're like, no. And I'm like, come on, man. Like, I actually had something cool that's going to happen. So they would joke with me because they know. They're like, no, we're getting to the town, Phil. Don't get us off track. But I'm like, but you're going to want this. It's hilarious. They used to mess with me all the time. So, but this 22nd coin, because they asked all these questions, and because I thought about it, it became like this thing where, oh man, I drew like a map, and it became like they had to like scout out this old dwarven, like, this is actually where I created a whole story arc about the 6 other dwarven colonies in the Misty Mountains. We only know of Khazad-dûm, of Moria, but there was actually in my world, there's 6 others that I actually created on this big map. And all of this came from them obsessing about the 22nd coin in the coffer. So I ranked the dwarven coin with Old Meridian only because only in the same category of the accidental story arc that became really big. So there you go.
Now I have a question about that. So how did you communicate to the players that the 22nd coin was a break from the pattern of 7s that dwarves usually use?
It hit me, actually. That's a good question. It actually hit me mid-game, a little later than the scene. And I thought to myself, no, there's got to be something there. There's got to be something there. And it had this funny feeling about this 22 coins is not, it's not normal. And so what I did was, because we had a dwarven player, I said it occurred to him, and then he asked more questions, and then it spun off. So I kind of did a little Deus Ex Machina, kind of a little bit,
That's all right.
And I told him, like I said, why don't you make like I don't even think I made him have him make a roll. I think I slipped him a note. But he was like, but he was like, cool. Like he
Yeah.
was the kind of person who wouldn't just go, Phil, screw your side quests. He really wanted. He was like, no, this is really good. So
Yeah.
that's another example of how unexpected player contribution also drove a story arc. Because
Yeah.
if it weren't for him really kind of role playing out his otherwise suspicious dwarf, who really wanted, he actually was into like the political intrigue among dwarves. I don't think the story arc would have taken that much life, but it did.
That's perfect. And that's a great segue into my number 4, because
Cool.
what you did there was you played into something that you knew the player would be hungering to sink his
Mm,
teeth into. You saw a player of a dwarf character, and you
mhm,
said, "I have a dwarven secret.
mhm.
Only your player character is going to
I
know
gave
it."
it to him like this, like an aside. Yep, yep, yep.
And so that brings us to my number 4
Cool.
favorite story arc, which was a game that you ran where you did that to me.
Oh, cool
And
segue. Do tell. I don't know. I don't think I can guess this. Go ahead. Yeah.
the game was, it was after you had left New York, and you had gone back to Michigan, and I had already left New York and gone back to Philadelphia. But I came to visit you and my friend Kirby in Michigan, and Kirby and I actually drove up together to your place, and we met Nate and many of the other gamers that you gamed with as a kid, and had rejoined upon your return, your victorious return to Michigan, and we played Star Wars D6. Now
Yep.
I may be conflating this Star Wars D6 game with the Star Wars D6 game you ran in New York when we were all still living in New York, but
Okay.
in one of those two games, you
Mhm.
had our player characters uh, drawn into the Rebel Alliance in the period between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi,
Okay.
drawn into the Rebel Alliance, and sort of appointed to Lando Calrissian as our boss. And it was Lando who was going to give us the missions.
Oh.
It was Lando who was going
Oh, I don't
and
remember that. Whoa. Oh.
and and my favorite Star Wars character of all time, if I were to make a high fidelity John Cusack, Jack Black top 5 list of favorite Star Wars
Yeah.
characters, Lando Calrissian is number 1 because he
Yeah.
is the coolest man in the galaxy. And so
Hell yeah.
when you had us working for Lando, I that blew my mind. Like that got me hooked from the outset. I was like in. And you know what? Now that I'm
Sweet.
thinking of it, it was when you ran for us in New York City, because I was playing Yar Astrabula, who was a
Yeah.
former stormtrooper.
Yep.
And when many years later, flash forward many years later, when Star Wars Saga Edition is out, it's a D20 based game. It was sort of like Dungeons and Dragons 3.6. It was like between 3.5 and 4.0. And it was like that kind of rule set, but tailored towards space opera. I was running that for a group in Philly, and I decided we decided as a group we wanted to set it after Empire Strikes Back, but before Return of the Jedi. And I was like, well, there's only one person it could be working for,
That's
and
right.
and so I modeled that after your game, and I had
Sweet.
them
I never
working
knew
for me.
that.
Yeah, and
Awesome.
I got to play Lando. I was like, "Hello, what have we here?" And that was like I was having the time of
My
my life
beauty.
playing Lando.
Oh
Yeah, it
yeah.
was great. So that
Dude,
was that
that's
was
so
my
cool.
top 4 favorite story arc. And I don't have
Wow.
much more to say about it, which is probably good, because we went on very
Right.
long with the list.
Right.
But that's number
This could
4.
be a long one anyway.
Yeah,
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 wow, that's really
yeah, baby.
great.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Now I want to okay, so now I
Thank
want
you
to
for
go back
being
to
a GM.
da, 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 da. You killed us, but we came back again. Da, 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 da. Dude, that's awesome. Dun, dun, dun. Um, that is really cool. And now, like, again, like this is stuff that I would always think about between podcasts. Like now I'm gonna think about like, I want to play some Star Wars with Lando, and you got to work for Lando. Well, the thing about Lando too is he represents that really great kind of like that really great like gray area between good guy and bad guy, or at least that's how he's cast, right? Or that's how you think of him. He does do a betrayal, but then he actually ends up being not only a good guy, but a rebel general. He ends
Yeah,
up doing that. I always love that moral question. And by the way, this is why also you're probably watching it, but this is why I really like Andor because on Disney because Andor does a good job of really painting that the moral dilemma, which ultimately leads characters to search themselves for what's truly important and good, and the ones that sort out something selfless and virtuous become rebels. But
Mm-hmm.
not all rebels, like if we look at Saul Guerrero, for example, not all rebels are virtuous yet,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Which I think I really enjoyed, like the juxtaposition. I think that's really kind of cool. I'm glad you enjoyed that because I do remember Euravian Estrabula with great, with great interest. I know that we talked about favorite. Have we talked about favorite characters yet? I don't know
We
if we
haven't.
have.
Shall we put that on our list? Let's put that on our list. And
We'll
you,
do
you
that a
know
little
what
bit
I
later. Yeah,
you know
yeah,
what I
yeah.
love about that particular character that we're talking about is that
Yeah.
just like how everybody calls Han Solo Han, but Lando calls him Han, and
Mhm.
George Lucas was like, well, we'll just write it up to the way different people pronounce different things in the
Right.
galaxy. I love how I always refer to the
Yeah.
character as Yar Astrabula, and you refer to him as
Estrabula.
Yar
Estrabula.
Estrabula. I love that.
Yeah,
That's so
right.
awesome.
For some reason. Right. Let's never settle on the right way. Maybe his dad calls him one thing, his mom calls him another. Yeah, that's awesome.
All right. So that brings us
That's
to what?
awesome.
To our respective number threes. You want to
Yeah.
tell us your number three? Yeah.
Well, I will say I do have more of a Coruscant pronunciation. But anyway, I'm joking. All right.
You do.
I don't know. I have five. I don't know. I actually have four written down, by the way. But
Okay.
but now that
All
I
right.
think, I do have like an implied list. Maybe I'll come up with a fifth one if we have time. But at
Okay.
least I have two more. So I'm gonna continue on Middle Earth, and
Okay.
then I'm gonna do the last. I'm gonna save the last one. So whatever order you
Okay.
want to do. But
All right.
bec- because I just told you about this Middle Earth role playing arc, and I'm tempted when I thought about this, I was tempted to make sure there was one from each one had a different game, and I thought, no, I'm still looking just for story. I don't care where it comes from. So two of mine happen to be Middle Earth role playing, but that's also because of my history with Middle Earth role playing. So
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
So this story arc, I think, is not dead yet. Which, by the way, I wanted to say earlier on in tonight's session that another thing that's I think we can both say is these stories don't always end because you always go back. Another GMing hack I think I would offer, or another thing, a piece of wisdom, is I think you go back to old stories and things that aren't quite done yet. You might sometimes lift out as a gem and put it in something else if the genre allows or if the universe allows. So for example, I mentioned that in my Middle Earth role playing universe, the one that I've traditionally played, um, Khazad-dûm is one of seven dwarven, excavations. It's just that that's the main one we know about, especially because the dwarves dug too deep and they got to the Balrog. So it obviously put itself on the map. But did you know, for example, there's another dwarven colony called Aule's Beard or Mahaltarak, right?
Mm.
And so it isn't really, but I made it
Oh,
up,
you
right?
made up. Okay.
So, but that's what I can tell people, and I can get them kind of into it. They're like, "Oh shit, really?" They're like, no, no. In my Middle Earth game, there is. It's like, oh, so there's a sense of continuity when you role play for as long as we have, and you go back to the same game set system or genre. You may feel a sense of continuity, but that's cool because you're still. It's almost like you come back to a canvas and you're like, oh, I can still paint it, and there's more areas to paint. But I'll keep the original and I'll just add to that map. It's the map of experience, right? So this next story arc has is in that genre. Although in this situation, I didn't really have much to do with dwarves. I just decided that was a fun thing I did that other Merc game, but in the same genre, same time period. Especially if I'm playing something. If somebody asked me, well, and we tried this once, Phil, let's try a Middle Earth game set in like the Second Age. I'm like, all right, that's cool. We could try that, but I really like late Third Age, the books around Hobbit into the Lord of the Rings. I really appreciate that. And frankly, if I ever magically transported myself to Middle Earth, I would probably live somewhere in 2941 around when Gandalf visits Bilbo. That's a really idyllic time to me. And I can't help it. Peter Jackson's given me a lot of the vision. But anyway, I've digressed. So anyway, the continuity here is in the same Middle Earth universe around the same time. Um, I decided that it would be really interesting to have players look for the lesser rings. And so here's how this shakes out, right? We know that there was 3 elven rings. We know there was 7 dwarven rings. We know 9 for men, with the ruling ring created to dominate all of those, at least in design. Didn't really work with the elven rings for various reasons I won't go into right now. And the dwarves also kind of resisted Sauron's influence, as the legend goes. But the 9 men were corrupted. But I reasoned, there must have been practice rings. There must have been other rings. In fact, one of Gandalf's quotes is, "There are many magic rings in this world, and none of them are to be used lightly." So I thought, well, how many? In fact, there were 12 lesser rings. Celebrimbor's original designs, when Anatar, the Lord of Gifts, who was Sauron in fair disguise, when he started working with the Gwythy Meerdyne, or the jewelsmiths of Osten Hill in Holland, he must have started somewhere with some designs, and he had to teach some of the elves, like the basics of ringcraft, right? And I'm sure there was some elves that said, "Cool, I get this," and they made their own design. So I decided it would be really cool if these lesser rings were somewhere out there in the world, and some organizing force, not Lando this time, but Elrond, right? Although it'd be cool if it was like a Billy D. Williams version of Elrond. I don't know.
Elrond, that would be
That'd be
awesome.
kind of cool. That'd be kind of cool.
I would pay to see that.
Right. And who are you? Right. Can you believe I have these elven problems? I love that whole thing where he's like, "I've got union. I'm a real administrator," you know. So
I thought
Elrond,
you were my Melonin.
Exactly. Nice. So Elrond D. Williams then will organize this group, right? And he tells them, our archivists at Rivendell have discovered that not all of the lesser rings have been accounted for. In fact, none of them have, and there's 12 of them out there. Or I don't remember. Maybe I had 2 or 3. I don't remember what I said, but they had recently unearthed clues that pointed to the fact that they were actually not in dwarven hordes. And there was a point, by the way, where some of the dwarven rings, at least 2 or 3, were consumed by dragonfire, or they're still there's still like meters underneath the dragon's belly in some horde, right? We don't know that, right? But that was what was like the legendarium will suggest. And Elrond's people said, no. Actually, yes, that's true of the dwarven rings, but the lesser rings, we actually have a couple of clues. Go out and find them. So it was kind of like a mission, like a downloaded mission, right? We got this. We're looking for some players. We're looking for some heroes. But the cool thing about the rings was I actually created all 12 of them, and I statted them out in Middle Earth terms, Middle Earth statistics. And the cool thing was, the way that I did this was I got on Amazon.com and I selected. You can have like really weird like fantasy rings and stuff like that. I actually carefully curated a list of the 12 rings. I made sure they were all like $15 or less, right? Because I thought I actually want to have them for the players. As soon as they find them, I will give them to the players. And I thought I could afford a $12 here, $10 there. So I actually have, in my little Tolkien case that I have on the first floor of my house, I have 3 of the lesser rings, right? Because I bought them on Amazon. We actually never played enough games for various reasons. I think I got busy with something in my career or something like that. We never played enough that actually revealed them. But now I use them as a meta legend, right? Where I have three of these rings, and I say, well, this is the red ring of lava, right? Not of fire, but there's like a lava ring. And so what I had done was I decided that the elves would have created them around elements or interactions with the elements. So you had Narya, the red ring of fire, but maybe you have you have Onodrith, the red ring of smoke, for example. You might have, or the gray ring of smoke, for example. So I don't have it right here in front of me, but I could list off these 12 rings, and they were all like some kind of combinations of elements. Oh, it was really cool. So my story arc was actually presenting the lesser rings to the world.
That is so awesome. I love that. And yeah, I feel like Gomez Adams every time you break out into Quenya. I'm like, Tish, you know I love it when you speak Quenya. That's really brilliant. And
Yeah.
maybe
Thank you.
an honorable mention would be you met Don. He ran a Star Trek game, and
Oh,
and
cool.
he and they were set in we were all actually playing canon TOS characters from the
Mm.
bridge of the Enterprise, and I was assigned to play Doc Bones, and but what Don did was he bought colored T-shirts and the silver insignia, and he sewed them on the breasts, and
Cool.
he handed them out to all of us around the table. I have it just out of arm's reach, and maybe I'll get up and get it and show our listeners and viewers before the show is over. But it was just like that, and it added such a great, like, to have that
Right?
prop was so much
Oh, that's
fun. It
so
just made it so much.
cool.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah.
well, that's a great story. And you know what? If any burgeoning GMs out there who are struggling for adventure seeds, that is a fantastic adventure seed, or seeds, I should say, because there's so many lesser rings. That's just a great idea. I
Yeah.
love that.
And you
That
can
is
do anything you want with them because they're barely mentioned. Yeah. Yeah.
that's wonderful.
Cool. Glad you like it.
All right, well, I guess I'll do my 3 and 2 since you've only got your one left and I've got my one
Perfect.
left. So I'd like
Yep.
to end with my one if you don't mind.
Please,
So
please.
I'll do my 3 and 2. So my number 3 was a Ravenloft game from the Ravenloft setting of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and I believe it was either the first or second edition of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. It was run by my friend Eddie before I moved to New York when I was still living in Philadelphia, and I had gotten back into gaming in my late teens. And Eddie just decided to run Ravenloft for us, and somebody did something.
Awesome.
Now, this is like the late
Awesome.
80s, so my memory is foggy.
Right.
But
Right.
somebody did something that like completely thwarted what Eddie, it completely derailed what Eddie had planned for us.
Okay.
And I think it involved a wish, if I remember correctly.
Oh, okay.
Wishes
Okay.
wishes can be really derailing because they're pretty powerful things. And Eddie was like, "What?" Like he stopped in his tracks. He's like, "What?" And he couldn't believe that the player who made the wish had made that wish. And he was like, "Holy crap!" And he like threw his book down. He was flabbergasted. He didn't know what to do. He's like, all right. I need like 20 minutes, guys. Just give me 20 minutes, and I'll figure out what to go from
Hold,
here.
please.
And he like stormed off, and we were like, "Oh, did we do something wrong?" No. He just needed time to like think of where to go from here because he couldn't proceed as he had planned with the turn of events that had happened. Well, when he came back to the table, and he began picking the story up, we discovered that we had because of the wish, we had traveled back in time or forward in time. We had
Okay.
traveled in time, and I wish
Wow.
I could. I wish this is maybe why it's like nestled in between like number 3, because
Hmm.
my memory of it is so foggy that I don't maybe have enough details to raise it up in the list. But I just remember it being so awesome that our characters actually time traveled in Dungeons and Dragons, and we had to undo maybe what our previous actions had done or something like that. So I guess we had traveled back in time, or I don't know. But it was outstanding. It was Dungeons and Dragons. So it was sword and sorcery, but on top of that, it was spooky because it was the Ravenloft setting, and on top of that, it was a time travel plot, which I love
Sweet.
time travel stuff.
Wow, it's like
So
it's a sandwich of all these things.
it was like a big, yeah, it was a big club sandwich. I
Wow.
love it. And
Cool.
and I don't usually like, there's certain genres that I wouldn't mix. Like, I didn't actually like the Beck Me Dungeons and Dragons. I think it was a Beck
Hmm.
Me, a basic expert companion
Hmm.
master immortal set.
Immortal.
Uh,
Yeah.
Expedition to the Barrier Peaks. I didn't like that because, spoiler alert, I'm gonna
Hmm.
reveal something about Expedition to Barrier Peaks.
Hmm.
I'm gonna cover my mouth if you don't. So turn the sound off, and when you see my hand go up, you know the spoiler's over. When you start off playing Dungeons and Dragons, but you find under the mountain there's actually a spaceship, and the D&D game turns sci-fi. And so I didn't like that because it
Hmm.
subverted my expectations too much. I wanted to come to play
Hmm.
a Dungeons and Dragons game, and that wasn't what I
Hmm.
got. So, but this, I don't know why, but it worked just so well,
Wow.
and that was my
Cool.
middling number 3. Bravo
That's
to Eddie.
interesting.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
was
dude.
fantastic. So,
That's so cool.
All right, so then that brings me to number two, and number two was also my early gaming years. I shouldn't say also because this was like when I first started to get into gaming, and I
Hmm.
think I talked in our introductory episode how when Paul came into our Philly group, Paul would
Hmm.
always come to the D&D game with this heavy briefcase, and finally we were like, "What the hell's in that briefcase?" And we rummaged through his briefcase, and we found Star Frontiers, and we started playing Star Frontiers, and Kirby, whom you met, he was running the Warriors of White Light, and this is a great
Cool.
module if you love Star Frontiers. It's an introductory
Yeah, I
module
think
to
I
the
remember it.
Starship rules.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
It's an introductory to the Starship rules, which are called the Nighthawks rules. It's a separate core rule book for spaceship rules. And Warriors of White Light, you play like Royal Marines, and you are cadets or ensigns or whatever, midshipmen, whatever you are, and you're assigned to this spaceship called an Assault Scout. And the Assault Scout has this NPC commander, and so Kirby was playing the NPC commander, and it was just phenomenal. I will do the spoiler thing again for people who don't want to know, but what happened was uh, uh, we were all in the spaceship, and Kirby said to me and one of the other players, "Can you guys?" We were in my basement. He said, "Can you guys please go outside?" So we went outside, went out my back door, and Kirby was running for the remaining two players, and events transpired that I was not privy to. And so when we were called back in, the other player and I, we came in, and we found our other two fellow players like mutinying against our commander, and
Whoa.
we had done several sessions and several missions with this commander. We loved this commander. It Spoiler alert, it turns out that the commander betrays the crew, and it was mind blowing.
Whoa.
It blew my
Wow. What a
mind.
twist.
And
Yeah.
so this other player and I walk in, and we're like, "What the heck are you guys doing? Why are you mutinying?" And we were like, trying to defend our commander, and it
Whoa.
just the way that played out was just so
Whoa.
tremendous. It was
That's
a great
awesome.
surprise, a really cool twist in the game. Kirby
Wow.
handled it really well, sending us outside. I don't know,
Yeah.
it just
Yeah.
worked. And
That's super cool.
that was my second favorite story arc. All right, well, so that brings us to our number ones. Phil,
Hmm.
I'd love to hear your number one, and then I'll finish off the episode with mine.
Sure. I don't know if this is necessarily number one. Now that I look at my list, I don't know. I think maybe the Lesser Rings might be my number one, but maybe it's number
Okay,
one, number two. We'll just say it like that.
sure.
But the other one I put on the list here, it wasn't mine. Like I noticed that three of the ones I talked about were me. So don't take anything. Yeah, these are good, weren't they? Like don't say anything to other people. Like Phil's a real like freaking egotist. Like what the hell? He thinks he's the best GM ever. No, I don't mean to say that. But this fourth one, this one is the one that I really enjoyed from somebody else. And it was our friend John had run a fake game called Silk Road. And Silk Road was the first, if I remember correctly, it was the first of three, a trifecta. Remember the magical trifecta weekend we had where
Yes,
I
yeah,
came
yeah,
into Philly, we got together with John and Jonathan and Michelle and Jay. I think it was over at Jay's house, I believe, if I'm
yeah,
not mistaken, and you and
yeah,
me. And we sat around his kitchen table and we met Jay's wife. I remember this. And we had like the most magical
yeah,
weekend of it was actually the weekend of gaming we had was so good and I was so impressed with the fate system that I came home and I remember like my wife's telling me, well, you gotta go out to Philly like you should go every 3 or 4 months because you came
wow,
home like just glowing of how
wow,
fun this was, right? I was like, you're right, like it's a mental health thing. And I know that I think you and I we're gonna cover the idea of gaming is mental health as a really important exercise to do for yourself and to restore a lot of creativity, a lot of like hope and power, a lot of camaraderie with friends. So I think we're going to talk about that later. But for me, that weekend definitely did that. And I don't know that I was in a bad way or anything like that in particular, but I remember getting a reconnection, a real great vibe from the group, but also from the stories. And the thing that stuck with me was this Silk Road game. And the reason why it stuck with me is because John did an amazing job of setting this really interesting melange of races. It was set in kind of like an alter Earth, if you remember. And the Silk Road was this trading road that ran between like that universe's Europe and Cathay or China or some points far east. We didn't really even have a name. A Persia, perhaps, right?
Yeah.
And so the Silk Road it had encounters on it. We were traveling in a caravan. And so my character was this debased priest who had actually lost his faith. But at the end, he sacrifices himself and finds his faith at the end. And so the interplay of the arc, my own character, then everybody else's character as well. I remember Michelle, I think, played, like a caliph. She was like an important noble. And I remember trying to impress her character and then being rebuffed and and it was a lot of like. So I think what I'm getting at is the story arc had so many opportunities for introspection of the character
Yeah.
that I personally had that meta experience where I became personally invested and engrossed. And there was also, I think, our friend John's style. I think the way that he also set things up, I reacted, you reacted, Jay reacted, Michelle would say a thing, but then the way he would spin like the detail of the opulence of the caliph's, tent next to the destitution of the beggar waiting outside, and then the magical mountain that we were supposed to arrive at. Um, it just I, I don't even remember every. I can't tell you I remember every detail of the plot, but it's one of these things where how you say, oh, people don't remember always what you do, but they remember how it made you feel. I remember how this game made me feel, right? And to me, that was a powerful, powerful story arc. That if I had the chance, I would come back and re-roll play if I had the chance.
Wow.
So yeah,
That's
that's
yeah.
definitely on my
That's
list. Top one or two, probably. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that is so true. Although you may not remember the details, you remember how it made you feel. That's what the Ravenloft game was for. I don't remember the
Hmm.
details, but I just remember the excitement. Yeah,
Yeah.
John, he's a professional actor, and so he's got
Mhm.
mad storytelling skills, mad performance
Amazing.
skills. So
Amazing. He
he
drew
does
it
a
out of
great job.
us. Yeah.
Yeah,
He drew it
and
out of us. It was
he
great.
drew it
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
of us. He knows
Yeah.
how to evoke because he really is an artist. And the idea for the Silk Road came. I suspect that Jason had a really big part in the creation of that universe because Jason is from Malaysia, and he came
Mhm.
and I met him in New York. He had come over from Malaysia to work in New York City, and that's when I fell in with him. And being Westerners, we tell stories set in the Western world, or at least set in a world that is steeped, even if it's a fictional world that is steeped in Western culture and values. And
Mhm.
so Jason comes into this mix, and he's like, well, but there's this other really very rich storytelling tradition from the East, and so he has always helped weave that into our games. When we played a pulp game, I was playing like the Great White Hunter, and somebody else was playing. Michelle was playing like a cabaret singer who had psychic powers, and so on and so forth. And these are all very Western pulp tropes. Jason played like the killer,
Yeah.
from a John Woo film, like the cigarette smoking
Right.
killer, and
Right.
and that was really cool. So he always
Yeah.
brought that East meets West element into our games, and I think that's why I think that the Silk Road game was at least 50-50 his brainchild, if not
That's
entirely his
right.
brainchild, because
Yeah, I agree.
because the Silk Road is literally East meets West.
That's right.
So you could set your stories anywhere along the Silk Road, anywhere on that continuum,
Mhm.
and it's the same campaign, and whatever game master brings the story to the table, it all fits in there. So it's
That's
a
right.
magnificent opportunity for those who are looking for a setting. That's a magnificent setting,
Mhm.
regardless of the gaming system. All right,
Absolutely.
so
Absolutely.
that brings us to my number one. So Phil,
All right.
my number one, actually, my whole top five list is a testament to the fact that you put that three of your list were your games
Oh,
is not
jeez.
is not a matter of ego.
Okay.
It is a testament to your skill and as a GM
I
and your
appreciate
storytelling.
this. Oh
And
boy.
the reason I say this is because you not only made my list at number 4 with the Star Wars Lando
Oh
thing,
wow.
you're my number one in the top 5 list.
Oh, no.
And yes, you are.
Really?
And I'm not just saying that because
No.
we're doing a
Okay.
podcast together.
Right.
It's actually it's the chicken and the egg. It's the other way around, ladies and gentlemen. We're doing this podcast together because Phil is one of my favorite people in the world to game with because he's incredible. So
Same way back at you, brother. Same way back at you. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Right.
So my number one story arc that I remember finally that got me so excited, that just made me explode with joy and surprise and happiness, was Ars Magica: The Return of Lasser. So let me explain this to the players. So
yeah.
when Phil plucked my number from the Complete Strategist, he was in the process of running Ars Magica for some players, and I think you had lost a player too. I think Andy had left or somebody. Some people.
No, it was some guy. It was a guy named Tyrone. But anyway, you go on.
Yeah. Okay, so Tyrone had left, leaving just Peter and Chris and Andy, and so you drew me into that, and then we were we were the core group, and then little by little, as the years went by and that game continued, we drew other players into the fold. We drew Sandy into the fold, and he was a wonderful addition. And we drew Adam into the fold. And Adam played a member of House Diedney, right? Is that how you pronounce it?
That's correct.
Which are the lost druids.
That's
they
correct.
Kind of separated from the Hermetic Order. There was a rift, a schism. There was
a schism war. Yes.
Enmity. There was enmity between the Hermetic Order. And I think there was particularly enmity between his character and my character, and I don't remember why, but there was enmity between our characters, not the players. I mean,
right.
But the characters. And so, and then something happened where Adam had to leave the game, and he left the game, and we went on for I don't know how long, months, maybe a year. We played without Adam, and I just really thought we would never see Adam again. And so one day we're sitting in Phil's Harlem apartment, and it's Peter, it's Chris, it's me. Maybe we had brought Michelle into the Ars Magica game by that time. We're sitting around the table, and it's our usual Sunday game. We get started. I got back from yoga, went straight from yoga class to your apartment. Everybody's there. We start the game, same time. It's the same exact routine every Sunday. And the game is going marvelously. It was always a marvelous Sunday session of Ars Magica with Phil. And the first hour of gaming goes by. And Phil's like, excuse me, everybody, I have to go into the back room and check what's up. And Phil gets up, and we're, we didn't really think anything of it. Phil comes back. The second hour of gaming goes by. Phil's like, excuse me, guys, I got to run into the back room again and check out something. He goes back. Again, we're not thinking it. I think maybe like in the third hour of
2.5 hours. Yeah.
Yeah, at 2.5 hour point, Phil's like, and then the door, Phil's narrating as GM, and he's like, I don't know, like the door opens, and standing there is, and Phil like turns, and here comes Adam walking out of Phil's bedroom in which he had been sitting, huddling for 2.5 hours.
He had been sequestered, this poor guy, for 2.5 hours.
Once again, we end as we began. The circle is complete. It was that overlap, that marvelous overlap where the narrative world and the real world were like one and the same in the Venn diagram. And it was like the character makes a surprise return and the player makes a surprise. And like I remember just jumping up and I think like hugging Adam, like I was so happy to see him, and it was such an unexpected, pleasant surprise. And that was so amazing. Like that was so amazing that flash forward 25 years, maybe 30 years, and I am running over Skype for Peter and Chris and Phil. We're getting the band back together again, figuratively. I'm running that rock and roll fate game. And I said, if just like with the Lando thing, how I wanted to relive that with another gaming group, and I brought Lando as their boss, I wanted to relive that moment and give it back to you the way you had given that to me. And so I secretly contacted Adam. I found him wherever he was in Connecticut. I said, Phil and Chris and Pete and I are gaming again over Skype, and I'm doing this rock and roll game, and I have an NPC character that's part of, like a major part of the backstory, and I want to bring this NPC character in at the end as a big surprise, and I want you to play him. And Adam was like, I'm in. And so we're playing, and I said, but Adam, I'm not going to make you wait in a bedroom. Here's what I'm going to do.
Right.
We're all in our respective homes. We're all gaming over Skype. So do whatever you want to do, and I'll text you like 15 minutes before I'm about to bring you in, and then you could get on the computer and log in, and you don't have to be cloistered. It feels
That's
better,
so cool.
and it worked perfectly. And so it's like at
Perfect.
the
It was
2.5
perfect.
hour mark, suddenly the three little dots are on, like somebody else wants to join, and everybody's like, somebody else is trying to join, and we click, and actually, Phil, I think you were the host, so you click in, and
Uh-huh.
there's Adam, and it was
There's
just
Adam.
like,
That was
I
awesome.
you know so
That was so
um
cool.
so that was marvelous. That was a marvelous technique
That's
on your
awesome.
part, and
Thank you.
so from each of these
That's so
things from our
fun.
lists, there are really cool techniques, really cool
Hmm.
lessons that burgeoning GMs can learn
Hmm.
from these things.
Yeah.
Like that, you could really pick out from our narratives, what from our narratives in this podcast, what it was about the GMing style or the story arc that made
Hmm.
it so special and memorable. And please use that in your own games, because we beta
Hmm.
tested them, and they are
Yeah.
fantastic methods.
Yeah. That's actually, Rob, that's totally what I'm hoping people get out of our podcast is if we can reach somebody with one cool idea or to be confident to try something or to try something even wacky, but it works. I think what you've covered, especially, and I think I've got a few of these too, is those moments on which the greatness of the game turned. There are some magical moments that we look, and to be perfectly honest with you, this does get in a little bit about mental health a little bit. I know I need gaming to get me through some of my worst times of cynicism and and bitterness if ever I feel it, because I reconnect with those. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to reconnect with those good feelings. I'm trying to reconnect with those magical moments. It's not unlike what I would see in my teaching as well, or when I would help coach other teachers and things like that. I would have them think about those magical moments when they reach students. But in a very similar vein, um, our games, especially, my friend, especially, had magical moments on which greatness really turned. And so if we can get back to those times. Now, we can't guarantee that every single moment, right? It's not you can't have that every moment. Don't expect that. But if you have one game where something really cool happened, this is also what Michelle taught me. Like, give everybody their day, give everyone their moment, because then you make sure that people walk away with those magical moments. And so I think some of the things we talked about in our previous sessions, especially this one, kind of lead up to that. Lead up to that. They substantiate that concept. Though, I will say this: to be honest and just real talk, my friend, not everything works. Sometimes there are things when you're digging for that magical moment, or you're hoping on that really cool scene reveal, or you're thinking that your players are going to get something really big out of something and they kind of don't. There are some times when you feel a record scratch moment or a derailing or like the wheels fall off the bus, to borrow the phrase. So I know you've talked to me about that, about some of those things, and you and I have always workshopped, I think, our technique really well.
Yeah.
But to do that, you have to have real talk about what maybe didn't work. So I vote this. I have an idea. How about the next session we devote to maybe stuff that didn't quite work so well that we think could that we know we improved on and what happened as a result of that reflection. That might be a cool like extension of our jamming hacks that we had before, right?
Yeah.
So like maybe we talk about stuff that didn't go so well, but it's okay because we learned a thing. What do you think about that?
I think that's a fantastic idea. This was so much fun, and that's
I
going to
know,
be so
right?
much fun. I can't wait. That's
It's
awesome.
never not fun. Like it's
So,
never not fun. It's really great. And again, like it gives me like whenever we're doing these things, man, I just walk away feeling like more fulfilled, better. My ideas are spinning too, so it's just great. And I'm really hoping that out there we have people that are listening that feel the same way that they're taking something away from this. So I say until next time, brother. This has been a great session, and I am looking for the next one.
me
How about
too.
that? All right. We'll talk to you then.
All right. See you, gang.